the White House seemed completely surprised by Kamala Harris's pick, had no coherent message, which goes back to the point we've talked about before. There is no White House. There is no West Wing. There is no staff. There is no campaign. The press day in and day out kind of clings to this fantasy that there's a functioning White House, and they quote Trump's aides, and they quote his advisors, and everybody's huddled in meetings. And it's just like every other administration. This very small example, the Kamala Harris thing shows there's no functioning anything. So it's kind of, it was kind of Fox News taking the lead, some of the White House taking the lead. But the meltdown, as I wrote at Press Run, came much faster and much uglier than I thought. I don't know. I shouldn't be naive. I've been watching these people for 20 years. But it was really 0 to 100. There was nothing intelligent. There was nothing factual. There was nothing logical. Anyone in politics can make a reasoned argument against any politician. And Kamala Harris is no exception. If you wanted to, you could explain why, if you're a Republican, you don't think she would make a great vice president. They didn't do any of that, right? It was, and they quickly went to the birther stuff. And we can talk about the press coverage of that as well. But so it was, look, the point I made in my pieces was, Fox News, since Obama left the stage, obviously they have embraced racism. Their Black Lives Matter coverage has been nonstop bigoted. But in terms of campaigns and politics, electoral story, I think they're kind of excited to bring this racism back, right? They get to talk about racism during a campaign, and they haven't really been able to do that since the Obama years. So they're bringing it back. But as I point out, it's even more. I would argue it's more ugly and more rancid because Trump has signaled since Obama left that there are no guardrails. Don't be subtle. Just do the hate speech 101 right out of the gate. And so in a strange way, I think the response to Kamala Harris has been even more hateful and more kind of over the top than even during the Obama years at Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and things like that. So obviously, and then you have the toxic stew of sexism and racism. It's going to be ugly from now into November. But your point from the beginning is they don't really know what to make of her. They don't have a clear talking point as to why she would be a bad vice president. She's incredibly impressive. She's incredibly smart. She's charismatic and all these things. And from a Trump perspective, he obviously has a very serious problem with Black women, and it's going to drive him crazy from now into November.
Well, I mean, so we have to go back and remember, it was Steve Bannon who said at the end of 2018, early 2019, that he saw her as the biggest threat to Trump. Because remember, at that time, people kind of thought Kamala would have been the front runner. Nobody expected.
Right.
But obviously, when Bannon said that, that was the signal to the online trolls to attack her over the course of that whole year. First, it was Bedouin. First, it was not a real African. Then it was not a real African American.
Right.
It was everything else. And she wasn't a progressive prosecutor.
Right.
And I'm sure they thought they knocked her off. It's interesting, though, now that we're talking, this comes to mind to me. Maybe Chris Dodd, even though he insulted her for being ambitious, he mobilized Black women to defend her, and I'm told caused her to be the one to be picked. But at the same time, Eric, I think what probably happened, this might be why they weren't prepared. During those few days after he said that, the media was convinced it was Susan Rice. And that was easy for this non-functioning White House.
Benghazi
and emails, and thank God he didn't do that. Because I'm hearing from people, including the most swing demographic we have right now, and that's white women. And they say, Mark, we have PTSD from 2016. We couldn't do Benghazi and emails again.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody has. Nobody can live through that. So they probably were caught off guard because they were convinced.
Oh, the Susan Rice.
That it was Susan Rice, and so that's just a reflex for them.
Yeah.
Then they had to readjust now to Kamala Harris, and I hope, though, as sick as all this is, I hope it still mobilizes the Democratic base, because we've got to be mobilized. They got to stay demoralized.
Right.
Susan Rice would have moralized their base. I mean, I'm sorry, mobilized. I'm sorry.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. Their base. So, but now, and you and I talked about this last time we talked. Call him racist.
Mm-hmm.
So the Associated Press finally did that in a headline.
Yeah. Will
others follow suit?
They have. The New York Times. So yesterday, Trump was asked at his briefing about this ridiculous Newsweek piece about, well, maybe Kamala Harris isn't eligible, and he did his birther 101. Well, some people are saying, she might not be eligible. It's out there. That's a serious thing. She might not be born in America. And of course, the press briefing is an awful place to do that because there was absolutely no pushback. People are just there to write down his comments. But obviously that spurred a lot of coverage. As you said, Associated Press, I'm paraphrasing, but Trump pushes baseless racist conspiracy. New York Times initially just went with baseless. They then added racist to their headline overnight. And here's the background and why it's important, and it's why the Associated Press was doing it. Last year, the Associated Press changed its style guide, which is the kind of the Bible that every newsroom across the country use. For grammar, word selection. AP Style Guide has been around forever. And the AP Style Guide said they were talking more about actions rather than people. If an act is racist, if a quote is racist, call it racist. Do not call it, let's get rid of these euphemisms, which exploded during the Trump years, racially tinged, we've seen them all, paragraph after paragraph. So the Associated Press, to its credit, said if something is racist, call it racist. Stop dancing around it. Again, they suggested it's tougher to call a person racist. But so it was important that the Associated Press, for this birther story, put in the headline racist, because that's what it is. And it's important that the New York Times did that as well. We've also seen some stumbles. CBS this morning had Jared Kushner on. They called it racist, but then they said, do you accept that Kamala Harris, is eligible to be president? That's not how you present this. It's not even a valid question. She's born, it's like saying, do you accept that the sun comes up in the morning? Stop treating factual things and Jared Kushner just kind of blew it up. Oh, I don't really know the facts. Some people are saying that. So the press has a chance to do the birther thing right the second time around, because, that's what the Republican Party is. During Obama, they spent years, kind of ignoring it as this swept through the Republican Party. The Beltway press, did not want to acknowledge what was going on during the campaign in 2000, when Trump ran in 2016. Very little mention of his racist birther stuff. Second time around, we're seeing more aggressive coverage. And during the 2016, we never saw, racist in a headline about Trump and birther. So the press kind of has a second swing at this. We've seen some examples that it's doing better. It's going to be more aggressive, but we also see some examples where they're not holding Trump accountable to this. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
What would have, and I saw Soledad tweeted about that too, about the question, do you accept?
Yeah.
What should have been the question, if a question at all?
Oh, it should. Well, the first part was good. The host was asking Jared Kushner yesterday at the briefing. Trump seemed to give validation to this racist conspiracy theory, and then you just say, why are you pushing? Why is the president pushing this obviously false claim to the American people during a national campaign? Right. This whole "do you accept?" It's the wrong way to ask, and the answer was just ridiculous. It was the same answer Jared Kushner gave Brett Baier on Fox News yesterday. Oh, I haven't really been paying attention. I don't know. Well, the president of the United States was in the briefing at the White House, basically endorsing this racist conspiracy. You can't let administration officials come on and say, well, I have to look into it. No, you don't. The moon is not made of cheese. You don't have to look into it. You need to be held accountable in why you're pushing something like this.